Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and I'd like to say something about Maya's legal victory from a few days ago. I use the word victory advisedly because, believe it or not, some of the gender fanatics are trying to present it as if it isn't a victory. Before we look at what they're saying, I must point out, of course, that on my website at peaktrans.org I have a full page of links to articles about Maya's case from all over the place. Also, here is a short clip from a video I made last year in which I give a brief outline of what the case is about. Those who don't know the details, Maya Forstater is a tax expert who was a senior researcher at a think tank called the Centre for Global Development. At the end of 2018, they refused to renew her contract because she had publicly expressed her concerns about the negative impact that gender ideology was having on the lives of women and girls, and about proposed changes to legislation in favour of gender self-ID. In December last year, 2019, she took her case to an employment tribunal in the hope of establishing that her right to express her beliefs is protected under the law. She lost, which should be shocking to anyone who cares about free thought and free speech. An appeal against the judgment is scheduled to be heard in spring next year, 2021. And she won. That clip, by the way, came from part 2 of my response to the poisonous pair, Jamie and Shabba's attack on J.K. Rowling, which focuses mostly on how they misrepresented Maya and her case, which J.K. Rowling, being a decent person who cares about women's rights, had expressed support for and has endured the most vile, hateful abuse and defamation ever since. I've just watched that video again and it really is quite good, though I do say so myself, so I'll post the link below. Here I'll just confine myself to mentioning that the very first thing that Shabba says in it about Maya is that she wants to legalise transphobia, and that sheer dishonesty is of course what characterises the gender cult response to the whole issue. Now, the original tribunal judge was required to decide on whether Maya's view that people can't change sex, that, as she put it in one of her tweets that was before that tribunal, male people aren't women and being a woman isn't a feeling, etc. The judge had to decide whether these views amounted to philosophical beliefs for the purposes of Section 10 of the Equality Act 2010. And really bizarrely, he found that far from meeting the criteria, this view isn't worthy of respect in a democratic society. It is, of course, incredibly annoying that acceptance of a simple truth and the knowledge that the truth is important and why it's important is described as a belief. Believing that male people can't be women is like saying, I believe the sun is at the centre of the solar system. But you're wrong, bigot. Educate yourself. Learn some science. That is exactly the kind of stupidity we have to deal with from the cultists. Of course, back in the 1600s, you probably wouldn't have been accused of heresy for saying that people can't change sex. In fact, they'd probably have pissed themselves laughing at you if you said they could, and then burnt you as a witch. You can believe that gender identity trumps biological sex and have that treated as a philosophical belief protected by law. Fair enough. You shouldn't suffer discrimination for having idiotic beliefs. But it seems ridiculous that Maya has had to fight so hard and go through so much because she disagrees with that idiotic belief, because she believes that gender identity doesn't trump biological sex. That is what it boiled down to. Maya publicly expressed her disagreement with an idiotic belief, and she expressed legitimate concern shared by so many of us about proposed changes to law that are based on that idiotic belief. And she lost her job. She lost her case at an employment tribunal. The Scopes monkey trial springs to mind. When was that? 1920s, I think. So 100 years later, a lie that requires faith to believe in is still prioritized over a scientific truth, and both are called beliefs. But of course, we have to use the law as it is written, and Maya's legal team knew that it was the best, or perhaps the only route that was open to her to ensure that she had the right to express her views without losing her livelihood. Pretty much as soon as that appalling original judgment was delivered in December 2019, legal experts were saying that Tribunal Judge James Taylor had got it badly wrong. So I fully expected her to win on appeal, especially after the Equality and Human Rights Commission came out in support of her. The judgment that was handed down last week goes into great detail, so there really is no excuse for misinterpreting it as the genderists are doing. Before we look at their responses to the news of Maya's success, let's see a few of the silly comments they made the day before the judgment was delivered. Now, this bloke is confident that even in the case of Maya winning the appeal, when she takes her case for unfair dismissal or whatever it was called back to the tribunal, she will lose again on some other grounds because of some unspecified, inexcusable behaviour. What behaviour? Could he know something the rest of us don't? Or is he just continuing to promote the myth that was circulated ad nauseum by the cultists that Maya had one or more trans colleagues whom she had bullied, harassed, and refused to use their preferred pronouns? I wonder which it could be. As I said in my previous video, and this falsehood was repeated so frequently on social media that one of Maya's former colleagues, Owen Barder, who had been a vice president of the think tank, issued a number of tweets correcting it. So there were no trans people working there, and she did not bully, harass, or misgender anyone at the CGD. If she had been the workplace bully they tried to paint her as, of course, those would have been grounds for getting rid of her. But the CGD did not say she'd done anything like that. They said only that her views were not consistent with their values and some employees were upset by them. Some employees were upset by the fact that Maya disagreed with their belief in gender. Believing that sex is immutable and that it matters isn't consistent with CGD's values. I mean, what kind of place is this? That's a ridiculous reason to let someone go. And now it has been established in law that her views are protected as philosophical beliefs. It can't happen to anyone else. That is actually huge, because I know Maya is not the only person to have lost her job for being brave enough to tell the truth. Another weird tweet from the day before the judgment came from this woman. I think win will make them furious when it finally sinks in that she hasn't actually won. What is she talking about? I find this interesting because after the news broke that she had won, these dipsticks were saying she hadn't won. How do they work that one out? I think this is all the consequence of them having lied to themselves and each other from the outset, just as they did with me, just as they felt compelled to portray me as the aggressor with evil intent in the assault on me by 3 of their number. They've done the same with Maya. That is their MO. And by the way, you may not be aware that it was the assault on me that pretty much peaked trans Maya. As she wrote on Medium back in May 2019, the thing that made me really pay attention was the attack on Maria McLachlan in September 2017. This attack was celebrated by trans rights activists on social media. So some of the credit for this glorious success should perhaps go to Tara Wolff and the rest of the hoodlums, without whose contribution it might never have happened. I won't be thanking them any time soon, however. One more tweet from the day before, and this one blew my irony meter to bits. It refers to the organisation called Sex Matters that Maya set up recently, together with biologist Dr. Emma Hilton, solicitor Rebecca Bull, and barrister Naomi Cunningham. And I see Professor Michael Biggs of Oxford University has recently joined the board of directors. Right. Just wonder if the amount of hateful and total misinformation her Sex Mutters Tea Club has published and sent out could be introduced as further proof of her unhinged state of mind. Would be interesting having that read out in open court, especially that letter sent out. I mean, how delusional do you have to be to think Maya is the unhinged one here? They've got a fantastic website at sex-matters.org. I'll link below to the letter referred to, which is calling for a public inquiry about policy, capture and Stonewall law. Right, so some reactions to the news of Maya's victory. I'll get this one out of the way quickly. It's from the Handmaid-in-Chief, and it is so typical of her. Profoundly offensive and even distressing, how the appeal panel described Forstater's beliefs. And of course, anyone sad enough to follow her on Twitter won't have the intelligence or the interest to check that claim against the actual judgment. Why would they, when they can read this gross and unconscionable distortion and get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside? Here is what the judgment actually says. Just as the legal recognition of civil partnerships does not negate the right of a person to believe that marriage should only apply to heterosexual couples, becoming the acquired gender for all purposes within the meaning of GRA, the Gender Recognition Act, does not negate a person's right to believe, like the claimant, that as a matter of biology, a trans person is still their natal sex. Both beliefs may well be profoundly offensive and even distressing to many others, but they are beliefs that are and must be tolerated in a pluralist society. See the difference? The judge used the example of civil partnerships and gay marriage as another example of a very controversial topic that has aroused very strong feelings more than once in the judgment. And of course, one of those numbskulls just had to read into that usage sentiments that simply weren't there. This is the bit GCs appear to have missed. Their beliefs haven't been deemed respectable or worthy of debate. That wasn't required of the tribunal. The judge explicitly bracketed them with homophobes. But the funniest thing was the response he got from this woman. He didn't speak warmly of them, it's fair to say. I wonder how she thought Mr. Justice Chowdhury, who, by the way, is the president and the most senior judge of the Employment Appeal Tribunal, would speak warmly of any views. Love the views, they're just the dog's bollocks, honestly. The judgment also says, it is relevant to note, and it was not in dispute before us, that the claimant's belief is shared by many others, including some trans persons. We were referred to the statement of Christina Harrison, a trans woman who professes to hold gender-critical beliefs. Right, here's the bully in chief. The thing Maya most cared about, using the wrong pronouns and misgendering trans people when addressing them, has specifically been highlighted as not protected, which is fair to say she hasn't really come out of this a winner. She has to call a trans woman she, her, etc. Every part of this tweet is false. Nobody cares most about the pronoun issue, and there is no evidence to suggest that Maya cares that much about it at all. According to the original judgment, Maya stated, "Of course, in social situations, I would treat any trans women as an honorary female and use whatever pronouns, etc. I wouldn't try to hurt anyone's feelings, but I don't think people should be compelled to play along with literal delusions like trans women are women." The judge of that original tribunal said he accepted these were her core beliefs and reiterated that Maya would generally seek to be polite to trans people and would usually seek to respect their choice of pronoun, which is the opposite of what that lying toad, sorry, it's a bit insulting, what that lying man said about her. But would not feel bound to. So the fact that she doesn't feel bound to go along with the lie in every imaginable circumstance is seized upon and interpreted as the most important thing to Maya is to refer to them by their sex. Such malicious dishonesty. She has to call a trans woman she, her, etc. Oh, where does it say that? What part of the judgment is he quoting? This. This judgment does not mean that those with gender-critical beliefs can misgender trans persons with impunity. Well, since there is absolutely nothing that Maya said anywhere that suggests she wanted to misgender trans people with impunity, it's just ridiculous to claim that she hasn't come out of this a winner. And it does not say that she has to go along with preferred pronouns in all circumstances, which is what the man's tweet implies. It says that whether or not conduct in a given situation does amount to harassment or discrimination within the meaning of the Equality Act will be for a tribunal to determine in a given case. Now, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me this could raise a problem in law. If one's gender-critical beliefs are protected, should one then be compelled to say or do something that goes against those beliefs? It's easy for me to say, but if I found myself having to work with a trans-identifying male who was as obnoxious, self-obsessed and hateful as are so many of the cultists posting online, I wouldn't call him she, and if they said I had to, I'd resign. Having said that, most trans people probably aren't like that, especially not at work, and doing a paid job sometimes involves saying and doing things you don't like. Sometimes it involves humouring people, lying, or going along with a lie. My guess would be that if you are working with a perfectly nice, decent trans person and you get on well, but as a matter of principle you repeatedly and deliberately refuse to use their preferred pronouns and this upset them and you get sacked, any tribunal will probably find against you, I reckon. This is where we are, but it's not worth worrying about. It's not worth becoming a martyr over pronouns, in my opinion. The important thing is that we are free to express our gender-critical beliefs outside of our jobs without fearing the sack or other punitive measures. They are protected under the law. That is what Maya sought, and that is what she got. Most of the responses to that liar's tweet were unbelievable. Here are just a few of them. I really feel like we come out winning today. It's not about you. You haven't lost anything if that's what you were worried about, but thanks to Maya, we have gained something. As this woman put it, the downside is the judgment that Maya's belief can be protected as philosophical because it doesn't seek to destroy trans people's rights. Unless, of course, you think trans people's rights include the right to harass and silence those who disagree with them, which the gender extremists do, of course. I mean, look at what this vile man is planning. He doesn't do them any favours. Here are some more. What are you on? She hasn't won shit. No, she hasn't won shit. She's won the jackpot. So there. What other classes of bigot are they going to make protected next? Fascist Britain. These people are sick. And of course there was the usual hysteria. This decision will kill. How? Well, she obviously didn't read the judgment. These are just a few of dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds, of insane and or really hateful tweets. How can anyone expect these people to engage in mature civil debate? They haven't got the brains or the integrity. Trans people that do have brains and integrity are the ones who agree with us that sex is immutable and that we shouldn't be abused and silenced for saying so. And they get as much hate from these idiots as we do. Still, at least that awful man, Jane Fay, didn't pretend that Maya hadn't 1. In this nasty little article he wrote for Diva magazine, he pretended Maya's win was a minor and inconsequential victory. It's complicated. At base, however, it springs from tweets made by Forstater explaining how she has the right to misgender a trans person when she sees fit, because biological sex. Oh, boring old biological sex, eh? So transphobic. And then, who needs the hassle of an employee who has made clear their intention potentially to harass an entire demographic? It's not a good look. No, what's not a good look, Mr. Fay, is you trying to paint as a nasty would-be harasser a feminist legend who has achieved a fantastic victory against your pseudo-fascist cult that wants to silence her and every other woman and man prepared to stand up to your misogyny. I'll give the last word to someone who knows better than Fay or any of the other cultists. Maya's solicitor, Peter Daly. This is a landmark judgment holding great significance. It is one of the most important appellate free speech judgments handed down by a UK court in many years, as well as the extensive legal implications for equality and discrimination law. It is a recognition of the unlawfulness of discriminating against people, in practice overwhelmingly women, who hold gender-critical beliefs. The implications of this judgment are vast. It is not only of major significance to the employment sphere, but to goods and services, education, associations and political parties, and to the way in which we interact and are treated by the state that governs us. By rejecting the practice of people illegitimately labelling as hateful statements with which they merely disagree, and by clarifying the process for recognising which philosophical beliefs are protected from discrimination, it will hugely improve the way in which social and political discussion is conducted in the UK. By virtue of the centrality of the European Convention on Human Rights to its reasoning, the judgment will also have this effect internationally. So, up yours, gender nuts. Thanks for watching. Bye.